welcome everybody to the Empowerment Series. Today, I am particularly excited to have Kathryn Ott Lovell, and she's kind of a household name. Certainly in the Philadelphia region, I saw her just shake her head no, but she is. And as someone said, she's actually, so it's really fun, as you all know, because I get to describe Kathryn the way that I know her. And people say that she's involved in everything, she gets stuff done, and she's hilarious. Is that on your resume that you're
No,
hilarious?
no, it's not.
Oh,
It's not, but I do laugh a lot. So,
yeah, I do too. It's one of my favorite things. So I'm particularly psyched to talk with you. But Kathryn, to back up all those claims, is she's the chair or CEO of Philadelphia 250th. I'm on one of your committees and honored to be on that. She also is CEO of the Philadelphia Visitor Center. Before that, she was commissioner of Parks and Recreation. So she kind of runs our city, but otherwise, not too much going on. But seriously, Kathryn, thank you for being on and actually for everything you do and for setting such a, wonderful example for all of us actually here in the region. So,
well, right back at you, Sue Jacobson. Thank you for all you do.
well, happy to do it. And so my question to you is tell us, like, when did you bet on yourself? When did you decide to bet on yourself and why?
Yeah, I grew up with a pretty like a pretty old parochial, I would say, upbringing. I was a pretty blue collar family. I don't have this, distinguished pedigree. I grew up in a working class neighborhood in Northeast Philly, and you know, um, hadn't really, traveled much outside of Philadelphia through my whole upbringing. I think I took some leaps in my career early, where I applied for jobs and somehow got, selected out of a stack of resumes and just sort of went from there. So I think there were quite a few opportunities like throughout my career when I worked places that felt like, it was an undoable job, or just something that I couldn't be successful at, that I didn't have the background or the resources or quite frankly, the mental, capacity to manage it. And didn't just survive, but sort of thrived in them, and created some success and started to, get used to that feeling of risk taking, personal and professional risk taking, and trying to continually scale up my what I think are some talents that I have, whether that's leadership or management or fundraising or whatever it is, and also just figuring things out as I went. As I said, I don't think I ever went to school for what I've done in my career. So, just having the sort of street smarts to understand, what I needed to do and to have some vision about what was possible, and then just to really just absorb and learn from the people around me, right?
I love that you talk about street smarts and you mentioned that your resume was picked out from a lot of resumes when you were applying for different jobs. Do you think street smarts played a role in that? I mean, what do you think?
I don't know. I think
Or
I
is
think
it,
that
yeah,
happens in the interview, right? Where I think like I really love people and I've always loved people and I love connecting with people. I think that's probably one of my gifts, is that I just gravitate towards talking and being with people. And I think I can build trust pretty easily with people and engage people in thoughtful ways. And that goes a long way.
mm,
I think and I often think about that when I'm working with people. I would much rather have somebody who I love to work with and love to be with every day than the perfect person for that position, the expert, so when I think about what you know the sort of the what empowers me, right? I think about those points in my life where I wasn't sure I could do something and then did it, and then
mm,
probably, and so that happened when I worked at the Mural Arts program. It was an incredibly challenging,
mm.
organization to work for, and an incredibly challenging time in its growth. And and then, but by far one of the most challenging experiences of working in city government. I listened to, part of your conversation with David L. Cohen, and so much of what he says, it makes such total sense and resonates with me around how challenging it is to work in city government, and how, you really haven't faced a challenge until you've tried to get something done in bureaucracy, and then,
Yes.
you sort of can feed off of it. Once you're able to move something in the city, then you're like, oh, I know how to get this done. I know how to do this. And you see things actually change, which feels miraculous.
And, it's funny because working for David in city government, it is actually every business is a people business. And I love how it sounds like you look for the good in everybody, and that's not so easy. So what do you do with the people who are not so good?
I think you can find, I don't know if it's necessarily looking for the good, you find the connection with people.
Mm.
If you can connect with people, then you can come to an understanding with them, even if you don't agree on what the good is. And I think that's the most important part, is how do you relate to people, and how do people relate to you? Do they feel like they can trust you? And isn't that the basis of so much, right? It's the basis
Oh,
of so much, is those relationships. And people think it's something that's unique to Philly. I haven't worked in a lot of places, so I have a feeling that it does drive a lot of what happens in Philly, and whether that's different from other big cities, I don't know, but I think it is so much about relationships, and so much about how the connections that people make with each other. And we're funny people in Philly, right? Because we're so honest, and we're so loyal, right? And that carries through in every aspect of our lives.
yeah, it's funny because, and David has said this in the past, and you're not really talking about negotiation, but in some ways you are. It's like hearing where other people are coming from and trying to make that happen. During COVID, you talk about other cities. We all rallied together during COVID. That did
100%.
not happen elsewhere. I heard
You're
that
so right.
over and over again, and everybody's like, what can we all do to pitch in? We
Yeah.
weren't perfect, but to your point, and I think you're right. I think, and I think it's leaders like you who set that tone. It's like we're going to work together, and no, we're not going to always agree. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think another thing that I think about a whole lot, especially since I'm in this job, which is, I run the visitor centers. I'm helping to push forward these great activations and programs for 2026. And, for me, at the end of the day, it's about how we bring joy, right? How do we
Mm.
bring joy to people who visit our city? How do we bring joy to the people who live here? How do we bring joy to the experiences that people can have here, connect people to those joyful experiences, those joyful places? And so I often feel like, I'm in this amazing, magical spot in my life at 51 years old, where I love my job, and I love the fact that my job is surrounded by joy. It exists because of this concept of bringing joy, and being a joy bearer. That's often how
Uh-huh.
I feel about myself, whether I'm, literally just coming up in the elevator today, directing someone how to get someplace, or talking to communities about what they want to see happen in 2026, or, just getting people excited about what's to come in 2026 and beyond, and lifting up these amazing experiences that we have around our city. And, even at Parks and Rec, in the hardest of times, like you said, in COVID was a dark time in the city. When you were working in the city, it was scary. It was hard, hard because of the health impacts for your employees, and, your own family. You were constantly trying to figure that out. But at Parks and Rec, we were the department that did not shut down. I mean, everything else closed. Parks stayed open. The recreation centers became
Right.
rec centers became
Hmm.
the learning centers. They became the testing sites, and they became the vaccine sites. And they were the food pantries. And, I remember thinking in, May of 2020, like, wow, summer is going to be terrible for young people. And we, to your point, so we banded together with just dozens and dozens of partners to save summer that year, and we hosted these amazing play streets, and we, brought joy right to people where they were on their blocks, when people were staying at home. So even at times when it was, incredibly challenging, I just, what empowered me was the idea that at the end of the day, that was our job at Parks and Rec, was to, to bring joy to folks, and not everybody, I'm well aware that not everybody has that great opportunity that I've had, to work in positions where I get to do that every day.
So my follow-up question, which I'm going to take back, was, would you ever consider doing stand-up comedy? But we clearly need you too much to do everything else you're
Yeah,
doing. So
no, I don't think about stand-up comedy. I do think daily, Sue, about a sitcom, about writing a sitcom that I like write it in my head every day. I think I'm a kid who grew up in the 80s. My dad died when I was young, and I sort of was raised on sitcoms. So I sort of see the world through that lens, which is, again, sort of like punchline jokes all the time, and so everything is a little bit, humorous to me, and I think finding the joy and humor in things just makes things better, and so I often think about, I feel like I'm living in a sitcom a lot, and think about writing a really great sitcom about tourism in Philly. And I'd also maybe, think about a radio show someday, something like this, where we can have fun and laugh. And there's a lot to talk about in Philly, and it's fun to find humor in it.
well, all I have to say is thank you for you. And, no,
Likewise.
seriously, we really appreciate you and everything you're doing and the way you look at things and how, you can clearly hear how proud you are of our city, which is awesome. Because I feel the same way.
Yeah.
And, thank you for leading us, and we're all here for you, so thank you, and,
Thank you.
appreciate your spending time with us.
Yeah, thank you so very much. It was a lot of fun.